Welcome to Chapter 8 for Exercise Science and Sports Medicine. So let's get started. Chapter 8 for Research Methods for Exercise Science and Sports Medicine. Let me share the screen and we'll get going. All right, so qualitative research utilizes a comprehensive approach for studying social settings and phenomena. So again, one of the problems that people may have with qualitative is that you're not controlling for a lot of things. But again, we want to see how things happen in real life. So there's importance for both. And again, a lot of times you have folks that say they're more quantitative or folks that say they're more qualitative, but in all honesty, you've got to read all that research to really get a good idea how things work. Because how things work in the laboratory under control, we can really manipulate to see if something has an effect. But then there's always, well, how does that pertain to the real world, right? And so then understanding the real world and how things work in the real world is also important. And so being able to look at all the research pertaining to certain subjects, both qualitatively and quantitatively, gives you the best overall picture. Right? So qualitative will occur in the natural settings, employs different data collection methods. Again, we can't control for things, so we have to have different ways to collect data so that we're not changing how things actually happen in the real world, so to speak. Involves complex settings in which people live their lives. And again, this is where things get hard because, again, when you don't control for things, there's a lot of what ifs, right? So a lot of times people look at, folks drink a lot of soda or say they drink the artificially sweetened soda, and those folks happen to also be obese, those folks happen to have heart problems, those folks, and so a lot of times people say, well, the artificial soda is the thing causing the obesity, the heart problems, and so on and so forth, when it just so happens, these folks drink artificial soda, they happen to be obese, they happen to have heart problems, but they also don't exercise, they also don't practice, maybe they're trying to cut back on sugar in their drinks, but they don't cut back on all the other excess calories that they intake. Maybe they also have that habit of smoking. Maybe they drink too much. There's a lot of other what ifs. There's a lot of other maybes that are in there that you don't account for in this type of research. And so that's one of the dangers of doing it, is that we want to see what people are doing, but a lot of times people try to jump to conclusions based on, well, here's one thing that somebody is doing, and here's a host of problems or ailments that they have, and they try to pin it on that one issue, right? And again, that's just, that's just poor reasoning skills is what it is, but we see it a lot, okay? Utilizes designs that can change as the researcher develops greater understanding of the setting. So again, that's one of the things is, say in that same scenario, you realize, okay, well, yeah, they drink diet soda, but what else are they doing? So, you may ask more questions, right? So, you did one questionnaire pertaining to folks that drink diet soda, and then you asked for height and weight, you got BMI, asked if anybody had any health conditions, you found out that these people had health conditions. But then you didn't ask other questions. So then, a good researcher would realize that and say, there's other things we know, there's actually more direct things that we have an idea of that contribute to those type of health issues. Maybe we should ask questions about that, right? And so that would be where you could see them change as things go on, right? And then again, you have emphasizes interpretation of lived experiences. Again, sometimes when you ask people, have you been through something like this, or we're getting their outlook on something. Again, the accuracy of that is going to depend on the person that you're asking, right? You can have, you know, say a car wreck, and 10 people can witness a car wreck, and you could get 10 very different stories or 10 very similar stories, depending on the people that are involved in watching. Okay. Um, so research guiding assumptions for qualitative. Social interactions are holistic and complex, require understanding. And there is, you know, there's what happened, there's how it made people feel when it happened. There's, you know, there's a lot of different things you can ask and understand just because of one phenomenon, right? So again, losing weight, you know, a lot of people are always trying to lose weight. So why is this so difficult? You know, it's difficult for a lot of host of reasons. You know, some people don't have trouble being physically active. Some people find it difficult to be physically active. Some people have, you know, don't have as much trouble controlling their calorie intake. They're not, you know, they don't tend to be very hungry or something along those lines. Other folks have larger appetites. Some people, you know, have, you know, when they're going through strong emotions, they tend to want to eat when they're dealing with strong emotions. Other people tend to not want to eat when they're dealing with strong emotions. And so there's a lot of complex issues when it comes to, you know, something that you think, okay, well, you know, it's simplistic from a physiological standpoint. You know, if you eat the same calories as you expend, then all things are equal. But there's a lot of complexity into why people overeat or why people undereat during certain times, why they, you know, get certain nutrition versus other nutrition. You know, why some people may binge on fats and other people binge on carbs, or, you know, people cut certain things out during different times. You know, that's all very complex, right? Studied situations are evolving, requiring adaptations of research questions as the researcher's understanding develops. So again, you know, as you learn more, you have different questions that will arise, right? And again, you'll see a lot of qualitative research lead to more qualitative research, to more, and I mean, and that's kind of the beauty of it is, as you learn more, you know, this is the thing is, you know, as you learn more things, you should actually have more questions than answers. And this is true, really true when it comes to qualitative research, is that as you start to develop some type of insight into what's going on, there's actually probably going to be more questions rather than answers that will arise if you have a good understanding of how things are. You know, it's one of those things that, you know, I've seen a graphic that's going around, and it's one of those things that, you know, a lot of folks that I've seen actually post this graphic are people with like their PhDs, and they show the area of, you know, it's like the curve of expertise or something along those lines. And what it shows is, you know, there's when you're first starting off in school and things like that, you feel like you don't know. As you learn just a little bit, you feel like you're an expert in the field. But then as you really truly learn more and more, you realize there's so much that you don't know versus what you actually do know, right? And so the thing is, you know, your ego and your confidence in what you do know actually does go down the more that you learn, right? And that's really sort of the same thing that will happen in qualitative research, is that the more that you learn, the more you realize you don't understand and there's more to understand, okay? And due to the inherent subjectivity of qualitative research, the researcher's personal perspective influences all aspects of the process. And that's one of the issues that we run into with it, is we see so much bias. I feel that, you know, if you want to be a really good qualitative researcher, you've got to come to terms with the fact that you have biases. And if you're going to do research studies in qualitative and your subjectivity can really play a big part in it, you've got to be aware of that going into it in every step of the process, so that we can actually get a good, clear picture of the things that may be going on, and really approach qualitative research with a certain amount of humility that, hey, look, coming into this because I have a feeling this is what's going on, but I could be wrong. And so when we're looking at this subject, let's explore all the possibilities of why a phenomenon is happening versus why, you know, instead of coming with the fact that I think this is causing, right? And that's really how the article should be, you know, or if it's a thesis or dissertation, it really should be written to that extent. So naturalistic inquiries conducted in existing social settings, researchers strive to preserve the existing context and minimize reactions or changes caused by their presence. Again, you know, think about folks that do research, you know, in the wild, like they study like grizzly bears or sharks or, you know, any other. I'm thinking of all the cool things I'd like to study if I was in that field. You know, you want to see how they interact, right? You know, your goal is not to see how they interact with you, but when you go out, you know, in the middle of nowhere in Alaska or Canada or, you know, the Northwest US or something like that, and you're studying grizzly bears, you're wanting to see how do they interact naturally, right? So again, if you're getting too close to the bears or you're starting to have interactions with the bears where you're feeding them or whatever else, you've now changed what's going on, right? And so you're not getting a good clear-cut picture and idea of what actually happens in their setting and in their world, right? And that's the same thing when we're trying to understand people's dietary patterns or their exercise patterns or lack thereof. The more that we impose ourselves into that picture, the more that that picture is going to change and not be the same picture that we're trying to actually see and understand. May include ethnography, so the study of culture, commonly held ideas, customs, skills, daily activities in a group of people. Again, you know, if you're going to observe how people do things, you really need to truly observe it. Yourself into that, but actually see what are their eating habits, what are their daily rituals, what are their physical activities, so on and so forth. Right? It's some of the earliest distinct traditions in qualitative research derived from anthropology, qualitative work, and sociology. Narrative inquiries relies on key informants, individuals possessing unique information or who have lived through special events and are willing to share information. Again, when you get a narrative, you've got to take it, you know, as this is this person's perspective. Now, again, the more people that you can interview that lived through a certain period or through a certain event, the better it is, because again, you can start to, when you hear commonalities from the same people starting the same things, you can start to then sort of, you know, some of their individual approaches that don't all mesh up. You know, you can start to, those things will sort of fade, you know, like fade into the sand a bit. And so the common themes that recur and recur and recur through all the narratives, you can say, hey, this must have really happened because now that we've interviewed like 100 people, all 100 people had these 20 things all in common to say about that event, right? And so those are all 20 things that must hold, you know, like you know, to a certain percentage amount of truth of that event, right? And again, the more people you can get involved in telling a narrative, it paints a more accurate picture of what probably did occur, right? So again, here's just showing the difference between ethnography and narratives. Again, the research question, you know, if you were studying culture, so to speak, is what is a culture of a group of people? Ethnography would be how do individuals in the community come together around a set of shared beliefs and ideals. The narrative would be what does this narrative or story tell us about this person or how they view the world or how they interact with the world. And again, how can their narrative be interpreted to illuminate the life and the culture of the group, right? So again, you know, from an outside, you can look at a culture, and you know, there you could have a perspective of, man, this is an amazing culture, and you may talk to some youth in a culture, and the youth in the culture might feel trapped. You know, they may feel like, hey, there's really no future for us, so on and so forth. You may talk to some of the elders of a culture, and the elders of the culture view it as a beautiful thing. You know, this is just a great way of life, and so on and so forth. And you may have folks that are like in between, you know, the older group and the younger group that have more of a blend of the perspective of, yes, it's hard when you're younger, but because of the way we do things in our culture, you know, as we're getting older, we see the benefits and the beauty of it. And so it gives you a picture of, yes, it's tougher for kids maybe or something, or maybe vice versa, right? Or you may just get individual approaches where some people, you know, like you may talk to teenagers, some teenagers like their culture, some teenagers hate their culture, right? And all those things play into it, you know, and you can ask the whys, you know, and so, you know, it may be, hey, in this culture, you know, it's a very, you know, heavy-handed culture in the fact that, you know, the elder men of the culture are ruling and dominant or something like that, and, you know, women don't appreciate the way they're treated in the culture, maybe vice versa. There's all kinds of things that you can get from getting the narratives, you know, as well as then also, you know, if you just observe the culture, right? So it gives you an inside perspective and an outside perspective of everything going on. Okay? Interpretive inquiries examines the participant's perspective and interpretation of life events and experiences. So again, you know, how somebody interprets, you know, so what did you think about that? You know, how did it make you feel? You know, was it something that shaped you in a positive way? Was it something that shaped you in a negative way? There's things that you can get from that, and especially if you're asking that of many people, you can get a lot of good information from something like that. Phenomenology seeks understanding of the experience, including the meaning, structure, essence of the experience for a person or group. Explores how individuals perceive, describe, judge, and remember experiences. Again, it's one thing to get one person's perspective and roll with it, but you may be missing a bigger idea of really how it was. You know, one of the probably the bigger events that I've lived through, I guess, in my lifetime would be what happened on 9/11, right? And if you talk to different people around the country, even around the world, about that event, it's going to give you a lot of different feelings and perspectives of things going on. You know, how people in France might have viewed what was going on here on that day in America could be vastly different than what we felt being Americans being here at that time. Or, you know, if you talk to somebody who lived in Germany or, you know, like someplace in East Africa or something like that, as they found out the events of those days, you know, their view and their feelings could be very different. Folks that live in you know, New York City are going to have probably a much different perspective than those of us. Like I was living in Texas at the time, and I was very far away from the situation. You know, those that were in Washington, you know, at that time, and so on and so forth. You know, they all have these different experiences and feelings because of how close they were to the different tragedies or how far away we were from the different tragedies that all happened on that day. And so, you know, if you ask one person, it could be vastly different experience than if you asked a whole lot of people, and especially if you ask people from different regions. You know, so I was living in West Texas. You could ask a lot of West Texans how they felt versus maybe Northern Californians, and there might be some similarities and some differences. You know, and again, if you ask folks that were living in New York City, there might be some similarities, and there's going to be, you know, some differences in those groups as well. And so it gives you, you know, the more people you speak to, it gives you a greater picture, right? And again, that's why there's, you know, it's always good to understand there's strength in numbers, especially when it comes to research. The greater the number of folks that you can incorporate into something gives you more of a truer sense of what actually happened or occurred or how people felt about it. Right? Heuristic inquiries expose the researcher's personal experience in conjunction with others' experience of the same phenomenon. So I kind of jumped into that a little bit. Gives you a deepened understanding through shared experiences, right? So again, we could all look at what united us through that horrific event. We could look at maybe what divided us afterwards, and it gives you a good sense of those things by looking through a lot of different people and different groups and how they felt during that. Okay, so here's the chart, just kind of going through that stuff again. You guys can go back and look at that. It just, it's kind of like the first one we went over. Excuse me. So critical inquiries seeks to increase awareness of social injustices and commit participants and those who read research to commit to social justice and change. Approaches research topics with clearly articulated mission or political agenda. Again, this is one of those things, it's important and dangerous all at the same time. Again, because somebody's approaching it with a really strong thought process in mind, there's a strong feeling of bias, and a lot of times not enough open-mindedness when speaking to folks, especially if they have opposition in the way that they see what was going on with something. And so again, this can be very important, but if you're going to do this type of inquiry, it's important to also listen to both sides. It doesn't mean it's going to change your mind any, but you need to listen at least with open ears and open heart of what somebody's saying. And again, it may help to understand why a social injustice is occurring, rather than already coming in with a pre-developed idea in your head of why it is occurring, right? And again, like if you look at things like, racial disparities or something along those lines, it's important to listen to people on all sides. Even if you completely disagree with somebody that's on a side, it's good to listen. It's good to really hear them out, because the better you can understand it, even if you completely disagree with it, it helps maybe to shape the future of how those things can change. When you become closed-eared or closed-minded to somebody and you're not willing to listen, then more than likely, and a lot of times people that have those type of perspectives are already closed-minded and closed-eared. You're not going to help by you being closed-minded and closed-eared as well, right? And so being open to at least what they have to say can open you up to having a better understanding of how their mind works, or how maybe they were culturally developed into thinking that way, and so on and so forth, right? And so again, you've got to be really careful when doing those things. That again, they're important because you're on a mission to help, to fix the social injustice. But again, make sure that you can do it in a clear way that is actually going to be more helpful and hurtful in the situation, right? Orientational inquiry studies topics, participants, and settings that reflect social injustices. Again, advocates increased awareness, commitment, social change. Frames research questioning both emotional reactions. Again, critical, important things, but to be very careful in how you do that as well, right? You don't want to incite emotions that aren't there by asking loaded questions. Okay, and again, be open. Be open when interpreting what somebody says as well. Okay. So again, this kind of goes through some of the things you might say. Oh, excuse me. Again, the questions that they have on here are actually pretty well framed. You can see, that they don't seem too, not they don't seem like they're too loaded in the fact that they're trying to like push somebody to say something. Um, they're very open. Like I like the one, how do marginalized individuals construct their understanding of social interactions with others in the community? It's a very good open question of asking something like, like, well, how do you see, how do you see that this affects you or affects somebody else, in terms of what's going on in their entire community? Sometimes it's not loading into, you know, um, this is wrong. How does it make you feel? What are you going to do about it? Or what do you want to, sometimes the way you frame things can push something in a direction, and it's really not what we want to do in research, especially qualitative. You don't want to push a direction. You want to ask a question and see what's going on in that direction. Okay. Check your understanding. Your literature review should be used to identify key factors that influence the settings and participants. Same thing we talked about in all the other literature reviews. Purposeful sampling is a key element of qualitative research design. Again, sampling folks that will be important to what you're trying to figure out, and people that represent the groups that you're actually interested in. Lengthy observation in a small sample best enables understanding of the complexity in settings. And again, sometimes that's doable, sometimes that's not. Just depends on how much time and resources you have. Trustworthiness reflects the quality or soundness of the research design, right? So again, as if in anything else, we want as much bias taken out. We want the way things are structured to be where we can test and retest and hopefully see similar results. The ability of the researcher to present believable findings. Right? So again, we want the sources to be credible. You ever notice on the news, a lot of times it seems like when they interview people about phenomenon, they seem to find the wildest, craziest people to explain what's going on. You're like, is this really the most credible source that actually saw that and heard? You got these folks that are just like all over the place. Some of them seem like they maybe like on drugs or something at the time that they're interviewing them. You're like, whoa, instead of finding somebody that seems like they might have their minds like all together and they could actually explain to you what happened, right? Those are, you want the credible sources, not the ones that are like, all right, this will be entertaining. Okay. Prolonged engagement increases opportunity for numerous observations and interactions, enabling development of themes. Right, so the more time you spend doing those things, you'll get a better picture. Triangulation is the use of multiple data sources to confirm or reject information. Again, not just like it's all four corners of the street that saw it. We don't want to get everybody from the northwest side and just talk to them, because if everybody on the northwest side, they all had a similar view and viewpoint of what transgressed. People on the southeast side are going to have an opposite view, right? And they may have been able to see and observe something that the folks on the northwest side didn't see. And again, the northeast versus the southwest and so on and so forth. They're all going to have some different perspectives, right? And so it can kind of confirm and reject. So all those things that all four sides see could be confirmed. And then some of the things that were almost interjected because of their lack of view of the entire situation can then be kind of teased out, right? Transferability is the extent to which the findings are useful for describing and understanding similar situations, right? So, again, the more times that you may observe things of similar, you may start to see some patterns that we can then say, look, when this is occurring, these things tend to happen, okay? Apparently, whenever we are going to go through pandemics, there's a good chance that toilet paper somehow is going to run low, based on the pandemic we're going through now. I don't know, so if we have another pandemic here in the next, like 5 years or 10 years of some other type of virus, for some reason, people are going to go nuts and go buy as much toilet paper as possible, right? Check your understanding. Data collection timeline. This gives you a roadmap for researchers and participants, laying out the planned methods and order of events. And again, that's important to understand and stick to and adhere to, so that things can be done in the right timeline and time frame in the right manner. Begins with observation period, enabling the observation period, where you're like, okay, we're going to watch you from January through March, right? Enabling the researcher to develop understanding, begin to look for patterns before being influenced by participant input, right? So they may, before they even approach anybody, they may kind of observe a certain culture for several months before they actually kind of go in and start asking questions or something like that. Intersperses observation with participant input to facilitate developing the themes. All right. Again, this is just a sample timeline. Data sources, the setting or the context. So where is this taking place? What time period? What's the context of what's going on? Like, if it's we're watching normal everyday life. Is this like a special event? So on and so forth. Perspectives of the participants elicited in the interviews. Written or virtual documents providing insight into the mission and goals of the organization and the researcher's observations, right? Again, observations provide opportunities for learning about physical characteristics of the building, including equipment, layout, sizes of rooms, amount of space allocated for each function, interactions among people, including what is said, voice tone, inflection, gestures, facial expressions. It's amazing how, you guys have probably seen this like in your family, right? So, your mom and dad could be fighting or something like that, or you could be fighting with somebody, and as soon as somebody, rings the doorbell at the house, everybody's like, oh, hey, how's it going? It's like, so somebody walking into the home is not actually observing what's actually going on in the home, right? And so those things occur in research as well. And so sometimes being on the outside looking in, as if you're not there, sometimes you see things that you're not going to see when you actually get into the interactions. People put on, like a happy face or whatever else, right? The observation period enables the observer to become an accustomed part of the setting, fading into the background, provides opportunity for becoming a participant in the research setting. Interviews, typically conducted individually or with 2 or 3 participants who are comfortable with each other. Again, you don't want to do interviews with folks who may be kind of looking at each other like, I don't really want to say something in front of that person. You want folks that are comfortable, that they can interact and they feel comfortable in expressing themselves and talking about things amongst themselves. If not, you may want to do them individually, right? Again, it can be used to confirm or triangulate known information, reveal new facts, or help with interpretations of data of other interviews that you conduct. Right? Focus groups, typically conducted with groups of participants who may or may not know each other. Again, we see this with products. A lot of times they'll be focus group products. So, Taco Bell introduces some new taco made of like they did the Doritos Locos taco. Maybe they'll make one with a taco shell made out of, I don't know, like cookies or something, right? Some dessert taco. Right? So they'll bring in a bunch of folks and have them try it, see what they think about it. If does it look appealing? I don't know. How's it taste? Oh, it tastes great, but yeah, it's kind of weird. Like when we first looked at it, I wasn't sure if I was going to buy it, and it gives them an idea like, all right, maybe we need to change the presentation. Say everybody tries it, they like it, they're like, hey, the taste is fine, but I was really skeptical to try it, right? So they're like, okay, we need to figure out a different presentation for something, or maybe vice versa. Like it looked good, but it wasn't all that great to eat, right? So then they go back and try to figure out how to rectify those things, right? Same thing, right? That's what focus groups do. Be structured to encourage group interactions that help to confirm individual comments, sometimes reveal deeper understanding of a problem or issue. Photo video diary conducted to provide visual record of participants' experience or phenomena of interest. Again, when you're interviewing, sometimes the way people look or they pause or they get quiet or get loud, sometimes that says as much as what they're saying. So if you can take a video of what they're doing, that may give you some more insight, right? Again, no pictures of the event. Sometimes can paint, picture of the event can sometimes give you a better picture of what's going on than the written words. Sometimes just by saying something, there's certain things that you just can't describe with words, right? So forms of qualitative research data, rich descriptive field notes, interviews and focus group transcripts, artifacts such as lesson plans, client charts, workout records, photo diaries, videos, scrapbooks, and wikis. Themes, recurring structures that explain or describe participants' thoughts, situational issues, patterns, in the context. So, everybody was either disturbed by what transgressed or something along those lines, or, made everybody sad, made everybody happy, whatever it was. Constructed by researchers following the coding and categorization of data to reflect coherent concepts or constructs presented in the situation. When people were happy with the leadership or dissatisfied with the leadership. Open coding provides descriptive labeling and highlighting of categories and properties of the phenomena of interest. Coding involves interpretations of descriptive open codes with interpretations that are supported by multiple data sources become themes. And then selective coding clarifies and confirms themes that have emerged in the context of literature. Okay. All right, so that's it for chapter 8. Again, if you guys have questions, please let me know. You guys can email me or text me, whatever you need, and that's it. All right. Stop recording and see you guys for chapter 9.